Hey everyone, it's Joe Waxman, and today I want to look at the chart of famous, renowned um, Chinese Communist leader Mao Zedong, or however you pronounce it. Um, just a little side note, which is kind of interesting. When I was young, teenager, I had a friend named Brian who was excellent at guitars, born 2 days before me. And Brian um, was in a band early on. He was in lots of bands, but one of the early bands that he was in was a band called Mao and the Chinese Revolution. So, named after Mao Zedong. Zedong, however you pronounce it. I'm going to share my screen. All right. Mao Zedong, December 26, 1893. Okay, he was leader of the Chinese Communist Party. And yeah, he died in 1976. So I'm not sure what point, but anyway, let's get into it. Let's get into his chart. I can't tell you one thing. He's considered the greatest mass murderer of all time, killing about 45 million of his own citizens. However, contrasting that, he was responsible, or I don't know, partially, I guess, responsible in some ways for the greatest population increase in China from about 500 million to over 900 million during his reign of leadership or dictatorship, however you want to put it. So, put those two things together, an increase of over 500 million people and murder of over 45 million cruelly, very cruelly. Some of the stories are, absolutely horrible. Torture, horrible torture, starvation, things like that. I don't even want to get into the details, but you can look it up, like very cruel things. So he was capable of incredible cruelty. But leadership, I don't know. I mean, it's a mixed bag, I guess. It depends how you look at it. Obviously, I'm not a communist, and I don't like communism or socialism. I'm not really, I'm for freedom. But anyway, history is history, and we learn from the past deeds of others, hopefully. So he's got a Capricorn ascendant with Sun in Capricorn in the 12th house by quadrant, but I always think, and a lot of people think this too. I mean, I'm not the only one that, if it's in the same sign and within 10 to 15 degrees of the cusp, it's definitely influencing. I mean, some people would say, if the ascendant is 29 degrees and the sun is at 1 degrees or whatever planet, it's in the same house, that's whole sign house. But there's different systems. Even in India, they have a Bhava chart, which means 15 degrees within the cusp, within either side of the cusp belongs to that house. So obviously this is within 15 degrees. It's actually 9 degrees. So that's strongly influencing the ascendant. And therefore we consider it angular, and sun in the first house is very strong. Right. Capricorn is ruled by Saturn. So Saturn is the ascendant lord. It's exalted in Libra, and it's conjunct the MC and South Node. So Saturn on its own represents authoritarian rule, right? It represents leadership, and from a very kind of strict rule-based authoritarian way. There's different types of leadership. There's Jupiterian leadership, which is much more generous and jovial, and like the guru, the wise person, the teacher. Jupiter can also be the lawmaker. Mars is kind of could be like a tyrant or a very passionate type leader, because it rules Aries, and so it's like initiating leadership. aggressive. Sun is also leadership too, in a different way. That's more of a glamorous, kingly leadership, right? But Saturn is very strong in leadership, especially in Libra. And then especially in South Node. South Node shows what he comes in with, what he's born with, the kind of energy that's through the first half of his life that he's going to embody. And so from a young age, then he was naturally going to rise to power easily, rise to positions of authority, especially with this exalted Saturn angular conjunct the MC is very, very prominent, right? And it's dispositing the sun, and it's making an aspect, it's making a square aspect, but obviously, angles to the ascendant will be square. It's not square by degree, but by sign to the sun. South node is actually, the nodes are square the ascendant pretty tightly. So, anything that's square the nodes will be very strongly destined, have a strong destiny, part of the destiny. Anything that's touching the nodes, either conjunct, south node, north node, or square the nodes, especially. You could do trines to the nodes, but probably if they're a tight degree, trines to the nodes, there's trine one, sextile the other. And yeah. But squares to the nodes, especially tight squares, will just be part of the, it's going to have to do with both south node and north node in a tense aspect. It's sort of like, I interpret it as a part of the chart that is started but not finished, right? If it's part of south node, it's something that you've been there, done that, right? Graduated from. If it's conjunct the north node, it's something that you have to learn how to do. And if it's square to the nodes, it's something that you started but not completed, but it's a very strong part of your destiny. That's my interpretation. So Saturn is in Libra, and then Venus is in Aquarius. Saturn is trine Venus. It's dispositor. So this is, and then it's in Saturn's sign. So this is an incredible trine right here. This is like a super trine, because you can have a trine where the two signs are not related. They're not in each other's, like here, Mercury and Moon. That's a good trine. Don't get me wrong, but Moon does not rule Sagittarius and Mercury does not rule Leo. But Saturn rules Aquarius and Venus rules Libra. And Saturn is exalted in Libra. And they're trine by degree. That's excellent, right? So here we have this chain already, a chain of dispositorship, which is very, very strong, from ascendant and sun to exalted Saturn to Venus, where these are exchanging houses, second and 10th. You could say 10th because same sign as MC and quite close to the MC. And so second and 10th house would include the second house. Obviously it's family and material assets, but it's also speech, right? So anytime people are speaking, like actors and singers, or just teachers, even like people who speak a lot, you're going to see second house a lot. So this means that he was able to speak and bring in his leadership, 10th house leadership, into his speech, that his speeches were bringing him towards leadership, and that his leadership was bringing him towards speeches. So obviously he was making a lot of speeches that help propel his career forward, right? And his speeches were going to be very Saturnian, but fair and balanced, with Libra exalted. That's quite strong right here. And then if that's not enough, we do have some planets in Gemini that are not trine by degree, really. I mean, it's a 10-degree orb, over 10-degree orb, but by sign. So still, we're getting in the 3 air signs quite strongly. And these are the outer planets. So, less of an influence here because that's more of a generational, but they are conjunct. So that's pretty powerful. I don't know what happened during this time, during this conjunction, but usually when the outer planets, generational planets, become conjunct, there's a big, huge social change in society. So he's embodying that as part of his ascendant lord, which is trine, Venus, and yeah, this is I guess 6th house because it's coming close to the 6th house cusp. So, the 6th house obviously is like, so enemies, daily mundane routines, health, illness, things like that. So he's combining a very strong work mentality into his leadership and speeches, things like that. I think that probably has to do with his leanings towards communism, right? 6th house is very mundane, and oh, and by the way, it's okay. So yeah, it's opposite Mercury, so that it's dispositor. So it's bringing in Mercury. So that's actually strengthening this conjunction of outer planets because it's in the sign of Mercury, Gemini, and it's opposite its ruler. So that's a debilitated, not debilitated, Mercury's in detriment in Sagittarius, but it is connecting to planets in its own sign. So that is a small benefit to Mercury as well. Yeah. And he did have health issues later in life. So, Pluto in here, Pluto and Neptune in here will definitely in the 6th house will, cause some health issues. But he did live into his 80s, so it obviously wasn't like super bad. So his moon is in Leo, disposited by a strong sun, which is the sun we already know is strong because it's dispositor, and the dispositor chain is very strong, right? It ends up with this mutual reception between 10th and 2nd house, exalted Saturn and Venus. But it itself is in the 8th house, which for the moon is not good because the moon's very sensitive. Obviously, it's the mind and it's the emotions, and it's a very personal planet. It's the second most personal planet next to the ascendant. Moon does not like the influence of Scorpio, right? 8th house Pluto, Scorpio, because it makes it very dark and heavy. And here I think we see a lot of probably where he gets a lot of his cruelty from, this 8th house moon. His 8th house moon can get very dark, right? And if he's dark, then he's going to bring that darkness up on his people. It is part of a fire trine with North Node and Mercury. And the trine to Mercury is good, means that he can express his heart more easily, right? Mercury is on the 12th house cusp. So he could have even had a psychic, or I would say intuitive. I mean, fire signs are not very deeply psychic in the traditional sense, although all signs have their own way of being psychic. I would say strong intuition and strategic planning, because 12th house is very secretive. So anything that is secretive means that you can go into hidden areas and think in hidden ways and secret ways. And a lot of times politicians have, especially 12th house planets, because of that secrecy, the ability to be very secretive. And it's also trining its north node. So these are becoming very activated. This, secret, hidden 8th house, kind of cruel moon, I would say. And this Mercury that is opposite. I mean, this is a wide opposition to Pluto, but Neptune, very philosophical, imaginative, right? Because Mercury in it's not in good dignity in Sagittarius because it's becoming too big. Mercury likes to be detailed, and if it's in Sagittarius or conjunct Jupiter, then it's becoming very philosophical and losing its detail, because philosophy and detail thinking are opposite each other. Philosophy means big, detail means small, right? Mercury excels in the small mind, small thinking. So it's becoming, his Mercury is expanding, so he's not very good in the details. And then opposite Neptune means even more dreaming, also in the 12th house. Very creative and imaginative, but not very good at things like math or I'm not saying he couldn't be good at math, but just the expansion of Mercury means that the tendency is less towards details and more towards philosophy and big thinking, expanded mind rather than focused mind. And activated trines to the nodes will increase the activation, because whatever is trine north node or south node will so south node, if it's trying the south node, it's going to have a flavor of south node. If it's trying the north node, it's going to have a flavor of north node. So north node means obsession and material gain. And in fire sign, it's very leadership oriented and passion. And then north node in Aries, in the 4th house, third house by quadrant, but again, it's within 15 degrees of the IC. And the significance of that is that homeland, 4th house is home, but homeland. So a lot of times politicians, people who are leaders of a country, will have strong 4th house significations. I mean, if they don't, it's probably because they're just political for being political. They don't really care about their country. But if they have strong 4th house, it means they really care about the homeland. We saw that in Putin. So he was really for China. Maybe his ideas were off and he didn't do it. He was cruel and confused. Mercury in Sagittarius, overly idealistic, overly Jupiterian, not thinking straight, but still very much into China, obsessed with the homeland, China, in a selfish way, Aries, right? And now Mars is in Scorpio, but it's not making aspect to the North Node, so it's not getting any support there. But Mars is very strong in Scorpio in the 11th house. And wide conjunction to Uranus, which also is Uranus is exalted in Scorpio. So this is very strong 11th house. So career success, popularity, Uranus in the 11th house would be very much, because that's Aquarius's original house, 11th house. So that's very much thinking about society and utopia, dystopia kind of thing. So there again, we're seeing where this Marxism, socialism is coming from. Very strongly Uranus in Scorpio in 11th house. Not necessarily that it would have to lead towards Marxism or socialism or communism, but because I think he's confused and couldn't think clearly and straight that he was seduced by, the wrong philosophy. But clearly he's thinking with Uranus in the 11th house, he's thinking about society, and Mars also. Mars ruling his 4th house and 11th house. Homeland, idealization, hopes, wishes, dreams. Very passionate and inspired by things like obviously communism in this sense, but it could be, if his chart were a little different, it could be a more utopian civilization. Jupiter is in Taurus. So his philosophy was tending towards a lot of practicality. Jupiter in Taurus is a very practical, grounded philosophy of life. I have my Jupiter in Taurus. That's why I think about things like food and exercise and things like that. It's also very, I have South Node, so it's a little different, but it actually is square Venus, which is the ruler of Taurus. So it's a tense aspect, but it's still good that Jupiter is connecting with Venus. Venus is supporting Jupiter. Venus receives Jupiter. That's good. And Jupiter is the great benefic in the 5th house. So 5th house is children. 5th house is also great for any sort of stage performance. So Jupiter here was making him very big, a very big presence, very big performer, very big magnanimous character on stage, in front of people, in front of the nation. The people could see him also because there's the 5th house is trine to the ascendant. 5th house is education, and generally very good, makes him very confident, very big, gives him great presence, right? Because the 5th house is like being on stage, so it gives him very big stage presence, very likable, very, jovial, supported by Venus, which again is also connected to its own sign. So Venus is connected to both its signs, Libra and Taurus. What else can we say? Look at definition. Nothing really here. Jupiter's retrograde. Neptune and Pluto are retrograde. Nothing worth mentioning. But I think you can see it's a very strong chart. Tendency towards cruelty with the 8th house moon. I'm not saying that all 8th house moons are going to be cruel, but given that much power, the Capricorn itself is not the most warm-hearted sign for sun or ascendant, so he's very Capricornian. And then coupled with an 8th house moon that is in the sun, that is disposited by Capricorn sun. And then, confused Mercury that, seduced by socialism, communism. I guess, I don't think he was evil. I just think that he was very, very big-minded, slightly confused, had an overall great chart that could take over the whole country, and was okay with, a certain percentage of cruelty and death. They had a large population that grew way more under his reign, and a certain amount he was okay with torture and death and starvation, things like that. And he wasn't detail-minded. He wasn't looking at the individuals. He was overlooking, like, people starving to death, people being tortured by, you know, possibly even more cruel military agents and whatnot. So it's the way it goes sometimes. I think also Pluto in the sixth house, because the sixth house tends to be quite severe, made him, you know, less and the Scorpio, you know, Mars and Scorpio, although it's very strong, it can be very, very dark and heavy. Anyway, it's always a mixed bag. So that's Mao Zedong. Very strong chart. Destined towards leadership. All right. As always, guys, hope you enjoyed this. And if you want to book a reading, go to my website, macroastrology.com. And or you can just email me at macrogoldmachine@yahoo.com. All right, thanks. Bye.